Well, in 2005, an Israeli archaeologist announced to the world that she had uncovered the ruins of King David's palace in Jerusalem.
King Solomon builds the first Jewish temple at a place called the Temple Mount. He houses the Ark inside within a special room called the Holy of Holies.
For nearly 5,000 years, archaeologists have struggled to determine the location of King Solomon's burial. But thanks to recent archaeological discoveries in Jerusalem, the wait is over, and we finally have a clue about the tomb of King Solomon. Surprisingly, what was found inside has shaken historians, scientists, and religious leaders alike. What exactly was buried with Solomon, and why was it kept hidden for so long?
The temple is completed by around 950 BCE, and for 4 centuries, the Ark in the temple becomes the center, sort of thrumming heart of the Kingdom of Israel.
Stick around as we reveal the unbelievable truths discovered inside King Solomon's tomb. King Solomon's tomb in Jerusalem. In June 2024, archaeologists discovered something unusual under the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. It all started during a satellite scan, part of a joint European-Israeli preservation program. The team picked up a void about 40 meters underground. It was rectangular, precise, and entirely unlike the natural rock formations around it. At first, they dismissed it as another anomaly. Still, the data caught the attention of researchers at MIT and Hebrew University, who were using AI and LiDAR technology to model buried architecture. What their system recreated stunned them. The chamber shape wasn't random. It matched descriptions from the first book of Kings, particularly the burial passages tied to King Solomon's final resting place in 1 Kings chapter 11. But that wasn't the best part. Keep watching, because what they found next will challenge everything you thought you knew about history. The team examined an old Crusader-era map stored in the Vatican Library. This 12th century document only showed the usual routes and landmarks of ancient Jerusalem, but also a hidden passage marked as Solomon's Descent. It sat just outside the Temple Mount. For centuries, no one had taken this seriously. Most thought it was symbolic or pure legend, but now, with modern data in hand, it suddenly made absolute sense. Tensions immediately flared. Digging anywhere near the Temple Mount has always brought political and religious issues. Remember that all 3 Abrahamic religions lay claim to the temple: the Christians, the Jews, and the Muslims. So, this time around, no country or group wanted to trigger chaos. The Israeli Antiquities Authority hesitated, and several religious groups protested. To avoid escalation, they decided to send a neutral team for excavations. By January 2025, UNESCO stepped in to mediate and oversee any excavation. They assembled a multinational scientific delegation and spiritual leaders to help calm reactions. It was the only way forward. They began to dig under strict supervision and in a smaller, less controversial area near the Dome of the Rock's southern wall. The team found a concealed stone staircase hidden behind a perfectly sealed slab wall. The structure dated back to at least the First Temple period, somewhere between 970 and 586 BCE. The artistry was smooth, the angle of the stairs consistent, and the materials matched those used in ancient royal construction. Fragments of burned olive pits and blackened charcoal were found inside the entry tunnel, just before a narrow turn. Lab testing in Tel Aviv revealed that they dated back to around 950 to 920 BCE, coinciding with the period when King Solomon is believed to have lived and died. That pushed the theory from interesting to potentially historic. Near the threshold, carved directly into the stone, a line of ancient Hebrew stood out. The words were old warnings and almost faded out. The message spoke about the tomb of a king known for building temples and leading nations, someone buried with purpose and protected from vanity or casual entry. As expected, the religious reaction came quickly. Some Jewish leaders cited Talmudic law against disturbing royal graves. Christian scholars linked it to a potential connection to biblical prophecy. Islamic clerics argued over the sanctity of the ground itself. The debates got heated. Press coverage was non-stop. Some called it a hoax, others warned of divine punishment for those involved in the project. Still, the scientific team continued to move carefully. What truly shocked the team was a special lock-like structure placed in the chamber's final stone door. It wasn't mechanical like anything seen before. The researchers cracked it using sample residue taken from surrounding chambers and reverse-engineered what the mechanism might have required in ancient times. Then came the moment the world had been holding its breath for. They eventually opened the inner chamber, and what they saw there will leave you completely speechless. As the stone slab was slowly lifted with precision instruments, the light from portable rigs revealed a chamber unlike anything seen before. The air was dry, untouched, still holding a faint scent of frankincense. What they found inside didn't just confirm one of the oldest stories in religious history, it also revealed a remarkable discovery. It raised even more questions than it answered. There were no signs of looting, no evidence of interference. Every detail suggests that they were designed to last beyond time. The chamber was intact, untouched by the modern world, and holding on to secrets far deeper than anyone expected. What lay inside the tomb would go on to rewrite history, challenge faith, and ignite one of the most controversial debates of the century. But that's where the next chapter begins. Keep watching. What was buried inside King Solomon's tomb? The second researcher stepped into that tomb, and it was clear this wasn't some forgotten hole in the ground. It was something spectacular. The room measured 21 meters in length and 13 meters in width, and when they measured it correctly, the numbers matched the exact cubits mentioned in the old Bible stories. That's not something you fake. The design was a mix of styles that looked as though they'd come straight out of Phoenicia and Mesopotamia, with sharp lines, deep carvings, and patterns that felt remarkably advanced for their age. Everything in there had a purpose. Nothing was random. Right in the middle was the showstopper, a sarcophagus made of gold, shaped like a throne. It even had lion heads at the corners. Not drawings, actual gold lion heads molded into the throne itself. And across the front, written in Aramaic, were words that made it clear who was inside. This was Solomon, the son of David. No title, no crown, just a simple line calling him a friend of God. All around the room, there were objects, hundreds of them, carved ivory pieces stacked in rows, tiny gold figures that looked a lot like Egyptian gods, and detailed little items placed neatly, like someone had made sure each thing had its spot. These weren't buried with him for show, they were left as part of a story. Some of the ivory matched exactly with what the Bible said about Solomon's throne, even down to the shape of the animals. That level of detail wasn't a matter of luck, it was real. Then they found a chest, made of plain cedar. Inside was a scroll made of copper, rolled up tightly, as if whoever made it didn't want it to be opened easily. The writing on it looked weird, not fake weird, just off, like something ancient and coded. People began comparing it to the Qumran copper scroll, discovered in the 19th century. But this one felt more secretive, as if it wasn't just listing things, but hiding something. However, it was what they found on the body that scared researchers the most. The right hand of the body wore a deep blue sapphire ring set into a heavy band with a strange design, two triangles overlapping, much like the old symbols people used to believe had power. Historians had written about Solomon's seal for centuries, and now here it was, right where it was supposed to be, still on his finger. It had scratches and signs of wear, indicating that it wasn't intended for decoration. He probably wore that ring every day. And the body, this was wild. They expected to find bones, perhaps some faded cloth. However, according to sources who worked on the project, most of his body was still there, preserved, as if it had been maintained. Almost 70% of his insides were still in place. Turns out whoever buried him used a crazy mix of frankincense and myrrh, resins that slowed down decay. They are still keeping most of the details away from the public, but sources close to the project confirmed that the tomb had a heavy, ancient smell. Here is another interesting fact. The gold found inside the tomb wasn't all from the same place either. They tested it, and most of it came from Nubia, which is now part of Sudan. That's the same region tied to the Queen of Sheba's kingdom. So those old stories about her visiting Solomon and bringing gold, not just bedtime tales. There's a real connection here. And now we have proof, sitting in a tomb that no one has touched for nearly 3,000 years. Carved along the walls, especially on the east side, were lines of text, not the kind you read in a prayer book. These were personal, like he'd written them himself. They discussed peace, alliances, and the loneliness that came with power. And then there were psalms, new ones, utterly different from what anyone has seen before. These were words written by someone who had seen too much and still tried to keep much to himself. But the biggest surprise was sitting behind another wall in the same chamber. Get ready, because we are about to reveal another secret that will challenge everything you thought you knew about history. They found another tomb deep inside the suspected location of Solomon's tomb, which was that of a woman. She wasn't tossed in there by accident. Her bones were arranged with C, R, and the jewelry left with her was a mix of African and Arabian design. She wore gold, lapis, and amber, all of which were associated with the Sheba region. The carbon dating put her right in the same period. The team hasn't confirmed who she was yet, but the signs are pointing to something big. The of Sheba may have done more than just visit. Once news of all this got out, the world froze. Scholars began panicking, rewriting timelines, and asking questions they had previously avoided. Bible experts, history lovers, scientists, and everyone else were suddenly back at the drawing board. Because this wasn't just some dusty tomb, it was a message across time, and it came from a man whose name still echoes in every major religion today. But the real mystery is that the Copper Scroll would like to know what discoveries were made inside the scroll. That's tuned, because that's exactly what we're about to reveal next. The mysterious scroll inside Solomon's tomb. It took the team 6 whole weeks to crack open that Copper Scroll, and when they finally did, what came out of it didn't sound like any regular ancient text. This thing wasn't just written to be read. It had been carefully coded using old cipher systems and even some sound-based frequency mapping techniques. They had to scan layers upon layers just to make sense of it. And once the words started to take shape, it wasn't the kind of content anyone expected from a royal tomb. The scroll mentioned items such as talking stones and vessels of light. It mentioned something called the Gate Between Suns. It was like reading notes from someone who had access to technology or knowledge far ahead of his time. If Solomon was trying to record something, it wasn't just instructions for the temple. Then came the 2 books written on old papyrus texts. The writing inside them looked like a combination of 3 different languages, bits of Hebrew mixed with Akkadian and Egyptian script. It didn't read like a story or a prayer. It was full of symbols and strange diagrams. Some pages looked like instructions. Others had what seemed like star maps and mechanical devices. It didn't feel religious. It felt more like a manual or a guide for something that needed to stay hidden or protected. Not far from there, they discovered ceramic jars that initially appeared unimpressive. However, when the archaeologists opened them, they found copper rods, iron pieces, and even faint traces of gold plating on the inside. They looked almost exactly like the ancient Baghdad battery, about which people still debate today. The setup was too specific to be an accident. It was clear someone had figured out a basic form of electricity, or at least energy transfer, long before anyone thought it was possible. But that is not all. They also saw a map of what is now known as the Arabian Peninsula. The map leads to a place that some scholars refer to as Ophir. According to them, Ophir was the mysterious city from which Solomon obtained his gold. For years, people argued over whether it was real or just a symbol. However, this tomb showed a mapped-out route that ended right near the coast of modern-day Yemen. That wasn't some legend. That was real navigation. Things got even stranger when the team stepped into this small square chamber attached to the tomb. The room was built from dark basalt tiles, and it gave off a weird vibe. Their tools started acting up. Compasses spun around. Magnets reacted oddly, and there wasn't a single piece of metal in the room itself. Some of the scientists thought it might have been used for rituals. Others said it might have involved levitation or energy manipulation. There's no way to prove it yet, but it's either for sleeping or eating. It had a purpose, and whatever it wasn't simple. On the main floor leading into the chamber, they noticed a mosaic pattern that had been carved with insane precision. It was the flower of life. You see it in Egyptian temples. You see it in Chinese architecture. Even Leonardo da Vinci sketched it. And now here it was, at the heart of Solomon's tomb. That wasn't a coincidence. It felt like Solomon wasn't just a collector of gold and wisdom. He might have been someone who saw the connections between ancient civilizations and brought their ideas together in ways no one else did. Then came one of the most unusual discoveries in the entire tomb. A scroll covered in seals and star-like diagrams that laid out a complete list of names and symbols. When the researchers compared it with much later occult texts, the match was too close to ignore. This scroll described rituals used to bind and command 72 entities. It was the kind of stuff people usually associate with magic and myth, but this version was much older than anything in those later books. It was like the origin story of all those legends had been sitting here the whole time. And that raises another question. Was King Solomon into witchcraft? Well, that's a story for another day. They also found a set of strange symbols carved into a hidden panel. At first, they thought it might be an early form of some ancient script, but nothing lined up. The symbols didn't match any known language, not even the rare or dead ones. The spacing, the curves, the repeating shapes. It was all too specific to be random. It resembled a language, but it wasn't one anyone had ever encountered. Some thought it might be code. Others wondered if it was a writing system that existed before the known ones. Either way, no one could read it, yet. The Copper Scroll and those old books also mentioned something called the Gate Between Suns. That phrase popped up more than once. It sounded poetic at first, but when you see it written next to instructions, diagrams, and mentions of light vessels, it starts to feel different. It could mean something real. Some believed it might describe travel between places, or even worlds. Others said it could have been spiritual. However, it suggests that Solomon had a profound understanding of the skies, way deeper than anyone thought. But then, just as people started sharing the story, everything got weird. Some of the original footage vanished from the internet. Researchers who had been giving interviews suddenly backed out. A few university websites pulled down full articles. At first, people blamed servers or scheduling, but then came the quiet shutdowns. Some parts of the discovery were locked up, not just by local governments, but by global agencies. Nobody gave a straight reason. They said it was for protection, but didn't specify what it was protection from. That's when the story stopped feeling like just a history lesson. Something had been found down there that was too big, too strange, or maybe too real to leave out in the open. But not everything had been uncovered yet. There were still sealed doors and still locked compartments. And still, symbols no one had translated. Solomon is widely regarded as the wisest man who ever lived. Maybe he wasn't just wise for what he knew. Perhaps he was wise enough to hide what the world wasn't ready to understand. And just as happened with the Dead Sea Scrolls, keep in mind that some parts of the scroll were kept hidden for decades. The same phenomenon occurred at the ancient Turkish site of Göbekli Tepe. The site contains facts that changed everything we thought we knew about human civilization. And yet, it barely made headlines at first. Thank you for staying with us. Why do you think the story of the lost tomb has been kept secret? Share your opinions with us in the comments section. If you enjoyed the video, like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Also, click the following video on your screen, and you will enjoy it.